League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization, and we are open to men since 1979. Among the things we do is we work to increase understanding. Can you hear me now?
Better.
We work to increase understanding of major policy issues and to influence public policy issues through education, such as we're doing tonight, and advocacy. And I have to mention that it's only after significant study and consensus that we do take positions on those policies. Now, it's our position on housing that brings us together tonight. And I'd like to quote those positions for you directly from our program. On housing, the League supports programs, policies, and regulations to address housing needs for low and moderate income families and individuals. And we support access to decent housing and a suitable living environment affordable to all. Now, our forum tonight brings together a wonderful panel of experts in their own fields, and each of them represents a local and or regional agency or organization that's actively engaged in the issues and solutions of homelessness. I'd like to tell you a little bit about our format before we begin. We've organized it roughly in thirds. The first third is dedicated to the agencies introducing their respective organizations. The following will be questions from the League by our moderator, Elaine Bowditch, and the final third will be dedicated to your questions. So please hold your questions until that final third. I'd like to now introduce our panelists. As I mentioned, all experts on the local and regional level on the issues and solutions of homelessness. Starting to my left is Lynn Wallace, who is co-chair of the Western Mass Network End Homelessness. Next to her is Jack Downing, President and CEO of Soldier On. Waylon Greeney, founder and executive director of the Amherst Community Connections, as well as chair of Housing for All Committee. Elaine Bowditch, once again, our League of Women Vice President. Seated next to her is Cheryl Zoll. She's the executive director of the Amherst Survival Center, and we're so happy to be here tonight. And thank you for hosting us. Kevin Noonan, executive director of Craig's Doors. And finally, but not least of all, Nancy Gregg, who's co-chair of the Housing and Sheltering Committee. And now I'd like to turn it over to our moderator, Elaine.
Thank you, Bree. Welcome to the panelists, and thank you for your willingness to participate in this important forum. Our time is limited, so I want to get started by asking each of you to take your 5 minutes to describe your work. And Cheryl, since we're in your house, I'm going to ask you to start.
Community is a really important piece of the survival center. So one of the things that can happen when somebody is homeless is that they've lost connection to their community, maybe to their family, maybe they've lost their job and lost that community. And the survival center, central to our mission really, is to help to provide that community back. So when you come in, people know you, you have a job to do, people miss you when you're gone, there's music playing here, there are people to talk to. So we feel that we're providing the basic needs safety net, but also providing the kinds of things that actually help a person maintain their dignity and really feel like the human being that they are, a feeling that's sometimes very easy to lose the sense of if you're alone out in the streets. I should add that we serve about 4,000 people a year, and of that, less than 100 are people who are chronically homeless. However, the services that we provide for the people who are homeless are, as I said, they're pretty extensive. And we're also very proud of the fact that a lot of the work we do helps keep some people from being homeless. So if you are in a situation where your rent is more than a third of your income, maybe half of your income, maybe more, and you're making difficult choices between paying your rent and eating, The Survival Center can really intervene there by providing food for people when they need it. That takes some of that financial pressure off, and it's easier for people to stay in their homes. So we see our mission with respect to homelessness sort of as a two-pronged one. One is when people become homeless, we're really here for them as a safety net, and we think we play a major role in helping to keep people from becoming homeless by providing the basic needs that they require. So that's a little bit of what we do.
Okay. How about Kevin going next?
Well, now that Cheryl has so articulately spoken about the needs of people who are homeless, and since she's going to be unemployed soon, we'll see if we can't get her to volunteer to be working with us at the shelter, because that is exactly the same type of philosophy that we have at Craig's Doors. Craig's Doors was started in 2011, in the summer of 2011, and the idea was to develop permanent affordable housing. However, during that same summer, almost simultaneous to our forming and incorporating Craig's Doors, which, by the way, was named in memory of Craig Lorraine, who was a guest at the Amherst shelter. He had once said to Laura Quinn, who was one of the founders of Craig's Doors, that he wished he had a door because he was just having a bad day. And if you think about it, that's something that people who are homeless don't have. They don't have the ability to close out the outside world, which all of us who have homes have that ability to just be by ourselves in a room. When you're homeless, there's fewer opportunities to be alone. So we named the organization after his untimely death in February of 2011. We thought we would do something to bring together people who were interested in creating options for people who are homeless. And we're proud to say that his sister, Craig had 4 sisters who loved him dearly, and alternately he stayed with them. But he would always get antsy after a while, and Craig was a Navy veteran. He had PTSD, and he had a substance abuse problem. So these are the things that kind of kept him like a rolling stone from staying with any one of his sisters, which would have loved to have had him stay with them. So we named this organization after Craig, and simultaneous to our incorporation, Milestone Ministries, which was running the Amherst homeless shelter, decided they weren't going to renew their contract. So we didn't anticipate running a shelter, but we suddenly had to reverse course and put in a quick application, and the town was willing to waive it was a brand new organization. We didn't exist the year before. They were willing to waive that in view of our staff experience with running shelters. So we were fortunate enough to be awarded the contract, and we started in the fall of 2011. You all remember the famous Halloween storm. Well, we opened for that, and ironically, we opened on October 29th of this year because of another storm, so Sandy, but it wasn't as severe as that first year. So we have a shelter that tries to be very focused on the community, as Cheryl said. So it's great to know that there's almost a continuum of care right on North Pleasant Street here, from the Baptist Church on up. And many of the people that we serve at night come to the Survival Center during the day, and they're very, very appreciative of the services they get here. So we try to we provide showers. We serve an evening meal, and we've had close to, I think, Jen Blaine is here with us. She's the manager, one of the advocates at the shelter as well. I think she said the other day we have over 175 volunteers, is it?
We're up to 380.
380, that's what it is, okay. Last year was 175. So we have so many people from the community. The JCA is involved, the South Congregational Church, First Church, the Unitarian Universalist Society, which when we first started the shelter, I was on the Committee on Homelessness with Wei Ling Greeny and Ellie Manir-Gadi, who's also here in the audience. And we tried to, the priority at the time was to try and find a site for a shelter. And we started by looking to the churches, and the UU was the first one to say yes. Then we moved to the Mercy House, which had a little slightly better facility, and then we found the Baptist House, the Baptist Church, and that was just right. So they've rolled out the red carpet ever since, and we've been very grateful. And we're looking forward to finding a more permanent site, but so far, though we have to start late because the church uses their facility until about 8:30. We are very, very grateful to have that site each night, and they've been very, very gracious to us. Okay, moving this way?
Yes, we'll move on.
And congratulations to Elaine Bodic on her award, along with Pamela Schwartz, who was supposed to be here tonight. They were both given heroin awards, local heroin awards, I should say.
Thank you.
as opposed to the other guy here.
I represent a committee, a town committee, and many of us volunteer in different ways, but it's a new committee which was formed, I think we started meeting last summer only, and some members were from the Committee on Homelessness, Whaling's committee, and I represented the Housing Partnership Fair Housing Committee, which was the last housing committee. That was disbanded, as was the Committee on Homelessness. But two of us were put on the new committee, Housing and Sheltering, and I represented the Housing Partnership and Fair Housing Committee, in which we're continuing some of the same things that committee did, but with a much broader perspective and a lot more commitment, I think, from our town government and officials. We are, of the members, we also include the Denise LeDuc, who is the director, of the Amherst Housing Authority. And she gives us another whole view of really what's going on within the town housing, and it's a pleasure to work with her. She's just a good committee member, and we all work very well together. At this point, we do have a vacancy. I will advertise for that.
Cheryl.
It's going to be scary. You know how to fill out those forms online, right? I can help you fill out the form. We have, as I said, met only for a year, and we have, or less than a year, we have a charge, and I'm going to read it because it's not something we made up ourselves, which I think the Housing Partnership kind of did make up themselves. The charge summary is that we consider the state of housing needs in Amherst across the affordability spectrum. So we not only include homelessness, we include people of all varieties of need for housing. It will and we are to make recommendations to the select board on steps the town can take to support the creation of new housing options to address those needs and to maintain existing affordable housing stock. The committee will support implementation of these recommendations as appropriate and measure progress toward their fulfillment. The committee's work will seek regional solutions and support regional goals for permanent supportive housing. Some of us have already worked on the regional, I worked on the All Roads Lead to Home. I don't know if there are any copies back there or not, but I was on one of the committees of that particular group. And part of our job is to really look at the master plan that was developed after many years, and to try to take what was written up in the master plan and bring it forth, rather than it just being on a piece of paper. So far, we have actually done quite a bit. You may have read about some of our activities. The major thing is the housing production plan, which is 141 pages of exciting reading. But if you're not interested in all those pages, you can go on the web and read. You can either read it all or read the executive summary, which would be my suggestion. Having read both, I would go for the shorter version. We met with the consultants who developed that plan, and we met with them quite a few times and looked over what they had written. We didn't just say, well, that's great, and let's go on. We talked about them and had suggestions from the committee on ways of revising the plan that the first plan that they wrote. This will be adopted has been adopted by the town and submitted to the state. It identified challenges and strategies to increase affordable housing in Amherst. So we work with affordable housing, but it isn't just with homelessness. So I don't want to make it sound like that the committee is only that. Right? It's called Housing and Sheltering Committee. We've met with those people more than once, and the plan was produced. And as I said, you're welcome to see it online. In the back of the room, there's a 3-page sheet like this with most of this information on it. We also made CPA recommendations through the public process that they have, and one of the things that we did was, we supported the Amherst Housing Authority's redoing of some Ann Whalen apartments. And when Family Outreach and Amherst Housing Authority thought it was important for the people who are in Echo Village, I'm sure you've heard about Echo Village, the apartment complex that has been bought, and a lot of people are having to move out of it. We supported $15,000 CPA fund for emergency housing for those people. We, talked about it and voted to support it, and we're at the meeting when it happened. Now we're working, we sound like real bureaucrats, I realize, but now we're working a comprehensive housing market study, which was called, I think, by town meeting even last year. And we will be implementing the housing production plan, and we are working on the prevention of homelessness too, in collaboration with local and regional organizations. And we are really just advocates for affordable housing in all regards.
Lynn?
Okay, I am pitch hitting for Pamela Schwartz, who is the director of the Western Mass Network to End Homelessness, our only technical staff person. The Western Mass Network to End Homelessness was started in 2009 via a commitment of $8 million from the state and another $2 million from the Fireman Foundation, so that they could create 10 regional networks to cover every community across the Commonwealth. It was an 18-month pilot project to create these networks and see what they could do to come up with innovative solutions. They were looking for systems change. They were looking for us to get together, break down silos. What could we do to further the cause to end homelessness? Kind of at the same time, as some of you might remember, 2009 wasn't a great time with the economy. The federal government came and put out some money for HPRP, so we actually got a significant amount from the state and the Fireman Foundation. It was over $1 million to create our network, and then the HPRP money flowed through the agencies that came through. So we had a lot of direct service when we started. When that 18-month pilot program ended, we were left without funding. So the Leadership Council, which I represent as chair, and just so you wonder how you get to be that, it's a lump on the back of the head after meeting. But in my paying job, I'm actually vice president of Dietz & Company Architects in Springfield, which has done over 3,000 units of affordable housing over the last 25 years. And I also chair the housing partnership for the city of Northampton, which is where I live. So I've had a little bit of experience about how to deal with these things. So the Leadership Council, which oversees the network and kind of monitors what we do. 50 leaders from faith-based organizations. People like Soldier On are represented on the Leadership Council. We have other business leaders, vice presidents of banks. We have direct service providers, folks from HAP and CAP agencies. All of the agencies that you guys would think of are represented across our Leadership Council. But it's a group that said, I think the momentum we're getting and the act of what we're designed for, which these networks were designed to break down silos. So Department of Mental Health is at the table. The Department of Transitional Assistance is at the table. We're breaking down silos. All we're meant to do is convene. So we convene and facilitate, and no one agency has the resources to be able to do that. So that is what we provide for the region. And we cover all 4 counties, which in and of itself, if we get to the challenge question, I certainly have a very good answer for that one, because let's just say housing and homelessness is a little different across the 4 counties. So we voted as a Leadership Council near the end of that 18-month period and said, the traction that we have, we can't let go of. We're hoping coming out of a recession, and we need to be available to provide these services. It aligned with a time where on June 1st, there was a bit of a storm in Springfield, a tornado. And from the work that our provider agencies did by rolling up their sleeves and having months and months and months of meetings where we were collaborating to literally place individuals in units of housing. They were on the ground within hours. They were setting up laptops. They, didn't care which agency was doing what, and they housed people incredibly quickly. And FEMA kind of said, we've never seen anything like this. So we are not direct service providers. We were created to collaborate with a housing first model. with those from education, faith-based business, whomever's interested in sitting at the table and saying, what might be an innovative solution for your community or your region. And we are continuing to go strong. One of the things that Pamela is phenomenal at, aside from getting people to these meetings and moving things along in our region, is advocacy. And one of the things I may get to with a later question is, we have the ear of folks like Senator Downing and other representatives, and they come to us saying, what do we need to do with this year's budget? So we are really on the minds of the Senate right now, and working to get in front of them with, here's what we need on the ground, and where to solve it.
I am Jack Downing, President and CEO of Soldier On. I took over the agency in 2001. Our main job back then was to provide shelter for homeless veterans. And at that time, we had 120 beds at the VA hospital in Northampton. And since that time, we've kind of changed the nature and focus of the agency, because the challenge became, how do you end homelessness for veterans? And they want to put an end to it in our country. Just some quick numbers: veterans appear 3 times more homeless than any other group in our society. And there were reasons for that we can go into later in question and answers, but that's a reality that exists. And the second thing was that sheltering, for all of us who do the business, realize is a temporary solution that creates its own problems in people's lives and continues to make them dependent on a transitional lifestyle, which doesn't do much good. In 2003, 2004, a young guy by the name of Ed Kennedy, who was a major in the United States Army, spoke at the opening of a shelter that I had opened in Pittsfield that year with an additional 60 beds. So right now, tonight, I house about 280 homeless veterans in Western Massachusetts in transitional housing, okay? And he came and was dedicating the building and gave the speech. And at the end of the speech, this is what he said. He said, I'm Ed Kennedy, I'm a major in the United States Army, I'm a left-handed golfer, I love to play softball, I have 2 kids, I'm going back to Iraq. And then he looked at all of us and he said, I will die for you. When he said that, what clearly went off in my head was the 25 million men and women of America that were veterans had all said to me they would die for me, and I never heard it. And I had raised 9 children, 6 of whom went to college. We had a good life. We had our own home. And I was working in a job where keeping people in transitional housing, wearing used clothing, eating meals that were less substantial than the meals I had every night was good enough for them. That didn't make sense to me. I thought that was horribly wrong. And I realized there were not a lot of people in my life who said they would die for me. I always assumed my mother would die for me. Okay? I don't know that my wife would have died for me. Okay? That's transitional, okay? But I realized everybody that put on the uniform, whether they wanted to say it or not, had said it. And as a result of serving in the military, they had come back with adjustment disorders, and we thought it was all right to criminalize those disorders. And when I worked in jails and prison, 12 to 15% of the men in prison are veterans. And I thought, this is wrong and we're going to change it. And I decided we were going to build affordable housing that veterans could own and live in and manage themselves. So I went down to DC, shot off my big mouth in DC, and found out from a wonderful woman by the name of Patricia Carlisle, who was an assistant secretary of HUD at the time, that we couldn't build condos for homeless veterans. Because I had told our vets, I'm going to build condos for you guys and gals. And they said, can't do it with federal money. It's not a concept that works. But Patricia Carlisle said to me, I want you to go to New York City, and she gave me some places to go, and I want you to go out to Minnesota. And she said, in those 2 areas, you're going to find a concentration of what we call limited equity cooperative apartments. And she said, normally, ethnic groups and faith-based groups have developed this housing with sometimes economic pieces to it for work that help support the whole project. And so I went and looked at them, I said, this will work. And so we came back and we developed limited equity co-op model. We went to work with the John Over, our great congressman, became chairman of appropriations for HUD and transportation. made me look very smart. Now, what you don't know is my nephew, Ben Downing, a recent college graduate of mine, was on John's staff in DC, okay? So, John Overton today, he saw it as the double whammy. He said, it's bad enough you, but I've got this young guy that comes in every day that haunts me. So he got $2 million in earmarks for us. And that really spun off the first project in Pittsfield, which is on a handout here that you can have tonight, of limited equity, beautiful, affordable, sustainable, gorgeous housing. Photovoltaics on the roof, R23 insulation, high compression gas boilers, Pella windows, knockout housing, okay? And the veterans that live there own, manage it so successfully that our management per square foot is at about 50% of the national average for maintenance. Then in a limited equity co-op, you get to share the leftover money at the end of the year from the operation. And because we built it with affordable housing money, we only had a $600,000 mortgage on this $6 million development. The veterans pay $582 a month in rent. At the end of the first year, they could have all gotten back $1,500. And the IRS said to us, hey fellas, we have a rule here. We said, well, we got the Massachusetts rules. We can return all this. And they say, we have a rule that supersedes that. And it says this, you can only give them back 10% of what the cost of their share was to own the share so they could rent their apartment. That's how cooperatives work. And we had arbitrarily set a share at $2,500. And we let each veteran who worked earn it. Veterans that had limited incomes, we got banks to match. And those that had no incomes, we were able to get banks and institutions to gift them. So they all had their share. So we could only give them back $250 the first year. But then they allowed us, so if you live in your apartment now, to make up the difference, you automatically had your heat, your lights included. Now you get your cable TV, your internet, and 20 Meals on Wheels a month from us, okay? So you don't even have to cook. And the model is really excellent. We've gone from 1,000 intakes a year for 265 beds, when we didn't have this permanent affordable housing, down to 390 last year for 265 beds. So people come, they stay with us, they're not leaving. That's what we do, and we're doing it around the country now.
After doing it at the VA.
Yeah, we're going to build it here at the VA. Yeah, I've got a project in two projects in Northampton. One on the VA campus for frail and elderly vets, another for women and children, being built on 11 acres there. I've got one in Agawam, Mass, in the old State Police Academy, 54 units going in there. Dietz and Dietz is involved with O'Connell and Appleton Associates. They bought Chapin School in Chicopee. We're putting 44 units there. So those are the ones in Western Mass. And then in Albany, New York, Holderness, New Hampshire, Jackson, Mississippi, and Dearborn, Michigan, we have projects that we're going to be going under the gun over the next 2 years.
That's quite a story.
Well, hard to follow. I can only say, housing is really the solution for homeless. There's nothing else, other than provide housing. So Amherst Community Connections recently acquired.
Can you speak a little louder?
Sure. We leased a property with only 4 bedrooms for 4 chronically homeless individuals. So that's a start. So we started out small in 2009. That's the year when I finished working as the soup kitchen here in Amherst. But I want to give you a little bit of perspective in the local history here for Amherst residents here. I recall when I was on the select board in 2005, we had Mr. Ken Mosakowski came to the select board, and he scolded us, saying to us that last night I was approached by a woman. She was homeless, and I had to, figure out how to help her. And so ended up that he called a friend who put up this woman. So he came to the board and say, do you know the severity of the problem? If you don't, you need to do a study, take action to see whether we have problems or not. So his personal story motivated us, the select board at the time, to set up a homelessness study group, and of which that Ms. Nancy Gregg was a member, along with others. So a year later, the survey came up that indicated there was some homelessness in Amherst. So that was in 2007. The group finished its work. So a few months later, after 2007, the select board, at my urging, set up a committee on homelessness. Because of the study completed, we realized there is some homelessness in Amherst, and we don't know the extent of severity. So we need to deal with that small homelessness issue we have in Amherst. So the Committee on Homelessness was established in 2008, took the result from the homelessness study group, and then ran with it. So in 2009, shortly after the Committee on Homelessness was established, the committee was able to work with the town, did a small scale called Warming Place. We were able to encourage 3 churches to offer their space that Kevin alluded to. So at the end, the First Baptist Church offered their space. So that was in 2009, a little place, maybe about half the size of this room, and there were 3 or 4 tables. Folks come in from the outside, they can sit, nurse on a cup of coffee, and have, some hot soup that area churches that donated. They cooked the soups and brought it to the kitchen, since there's no cooking then, and the grilled cheese sandwiches made 4 or 5 dozens at a time by Boy Scout, for example, brought them in. So that was the first year. And then in 2010, the town realized, judging from the response of this initiative, it was very welcome and very much needed. So in 2010, a full-fledged shelter was established. And at that time, there were 16 beds in 2010. So as a result of that good work in 2010, we continue the town continued to fund the homeless shelter. So 2011, 2012, every year there was some funding goes for the shelter. So at the same time, as you think about, well, things seem to be happening without much difficulties, but on the surface, it is so that seems things happen on schedule. 2006, Ken came to the board, urged the board. 2007, we had a study completed. In 2008, we had the Committee on Homelessness established. In 2009, we had the warming place set up. But every step along the way, there are obstacles here to overcome. And dedicated citizens, supportive town officials, and money was available to make this all possible. So it's really to the testament of our community that we put this on the table and made it all possible. So that's where Amherst Community Connections, another agency that I represent here, came into work. That we had all these people who are homeless, and there was a shelter for them to go to at night. But during the day, what do they do to further themselves? And thanks to the Survival Center, they have a place to go for a hot meal, for a nice shower, for a storage space here. However, their other needs are met. Housing needs. They come here for a nice hot meal, but where do they go? So they are still on the street. So that's the toughest one, is to get housing. So to get housing, you have to have income. And how do you get income? Either you work to get income, or if you are disabled, you apply for disability income. And these are things require advocacy. So that's how Amherst Community Connections come to being. We help them access housing. But before you hit the housing part, you have to get them to get income. But before they can get income, they also have other obstacles, whether it's the mental health, stopping from going forth their job, or whether it's the alcoholism, stopping from fully functional. So these are the issues that we also have to help them navigate, to deal with. So with all of that advocacy, I am proud to say that today, Amherst homelessness is being addressed at a local level, and the town has put money behind it. So next year, despite the CDBG funding being cut back, we are expecting we will be able to do it. Thank you.
Well, It's a complicated issue, but it looks like these 6 folks are really working on not only homelessness, but affordable housing, which I think is probably the ultimate goal. We have about 5 questions, and I will ask each question, and each of you will have 2 minutes to respond to it. So the first one is, what are 2 major obstacles faced by your particular committee, organization, agency, or service delivery area? Who'd like to go first? Okay.
Alluded to it earlier in my comments, which is for us, covering 4 counties and what homelessness looks like in Orange and North Adams versus Holyoke and Springfield. It's just getting your brain around that is probably the biggest thing. But everyone works at it, and we have agencies and volunteers and people coming to meetings in every one of the counties, and we're furthering our work. But it is a challenge because it's very different. It can be funded differently. You know, in Orange, folks are doubling up and tripling up. You know, in Holyoke and Springfield, you might find them by a river. Right? It's just a different way that it presents itself. And I'm going to steal the thunder because I went first, guys. The biggest challenges are lack of affordable housing and, you know, housing that's available for people, as well as issues around people not having enough income to afford the housing. So those are the 2 biggest things that we try to face every day.
For us at Soldier On, I think there are 2 things that are really inhibiting our growth. One is the medical model of service delivery in the United States. We expect people to make appointments with doctors, social workers, and agencies. 17% of the homeless people I work with have a valid driver's license, and we expect them to keep 3, 4, or 5 appointments. So the medical model doesn't work, whether it's for dental appointments, medical appointments, whatever. So we have to learn to deliver services where people live, and we have to learn to deliver people to the services we can't deliver to them. At Soldier On, that's the model we live every day. We refuse to not work with agencies that will not deliver services where our people live unless it's an absolute necessity that they get that service. We work at that. Our staff does not have offices. They must be where the people who we're serving live. They must be in the rooms, in the facilities with them, never in their office. So that's the first thing. The second biggest one is transportation. Okay, the barriers we've built to people reestablishing their licenses as a result of not paying fines, of old DUIs, of a whole series of things, is just insanity when we expect in this world for people to get to places. So we are working now on a new system of coordinating van service in the 4 western counties of Massachusetts. We got a $2 million grant, and we're going to work with all the 501c3s to coordinate all our van trips back and forth with technology, so that, you know, if I have a trip going to Northampton to Springfield, I can pick up the 3 people from the survival center that need to be in Springfield, need to come back. We think it could eliminate 25% of the cost of transportation for all the 501c3s. We're one of 3 awards in the United States for this, so we're working with the Berkshire RTA to do that, and we should have the hardware all built in and ready to go in another 14 months in the facility all staffed out by homeless vets that are trained to do all that. So that's the other win-win for us in that. So, but those are the hard ones.
I think for us, Amherst Community Connections, what we found the hardest one is really lack of affordable housing here. So very lucky that we are able to rent a unit with 4 bedrooms, and it's about 30% below the market rate. We are able to rent it. So therefore, when we turn around to rent to the 4 individuals, right now they have been chronically homeless as the first criteria. So when we offer the housing to them, there's a small program fee associated with it, and that small program fee has to cover the rent, has to cover the utility, has to cover the social service provided. But the idea is to provide housing, and then you have on-site service provided to them. So it's really a wraparound service provided. So we have other agencies, for example, Elliott Homeless Services, who come in to work with individuals in there and provide their expertise to make sure that people who come in, they will stay housed. At the same time, our goal is really have them transition to a permanent housing because we have just a transitional housing piece. So our difficulty is that right now, for example, a couple weeks ago, I had one gentleman finished his housing with us, moved up at 11 o'clock in the morning. By 1 o'clock in the afternoon, 2 hours I was able to clean up the room and move in the other person who was just interviewed and move in the same day at 1 o'clock, 2 hours later. And that just showed you the housing is so tight, someone is really waiting. So right now, for example, I have a gentleman who is waiting to move in, but I don't have any vacancy. So he is staying at respite, and the respite cost about $300 a day to stay. And no housing, so using the respite as a way to stay housed versus to have a place to be. So it's very hard, and originally we thought, okay, one person moving up at the end of this month, and another person changed his mind. So therefore, this person is left heartbroken. So how do you make this happen? It all comes down to the number game. How many units do we have that we can have them in? So that's really the one biggest obstacle. If we can deal with the obstacle, the rest is a piece of cake. So if you got a piece of property or house rental, please come and talk to me. Well, I'm a very responsible person.
Well, transportation and affordable housing are the two big ones. The other thing we encounter here is we work collaboratively with other agencies, and one thing there is a shortage of is people who are doing advocacy and case management to help people navigate a lot of the obstacles that they have to get them to housing. Whaling mentioned an organization that isn't represented here but is very important in Amherst in terms of providing services, and that's Elliott Homeless Services. Some of you may know Meg Wright. She's at the Survival Center on Thursdays for about 5 hours, and the line is just out the door in terms of people needing to see her. So if I would add one thing to that, it would really be just more resources, one-on-one working with people to get them the help that they need.
So, again, Cheryl hit it on the head. Resources are the issue. In terms of, and Meg Wright also shows up at the shelter on Thursday night, so she's a busy person on Thursday. But she also has, her help has been invaluable because she focuses, Elliott in general, focuses primarily on people who are duly diagnosed and people who have mental health problems as well as substance abuse problems. So it's very helpful to have her input when we're working with people. But the key problem for the actual shelter itself won't be realized this year, but next year, and that is that the funding, Amherst received community development block grant funds, which are federal dollars that were channeled through the State Department of Housing and Community Development, DHCD as it's known. We live in a world of alphabet soup, and so Human Services is no exception. So the town enjoyed a mini entitlement status, whereas Northampton was grandfathered in and has the status as an entitlement community and gets a direct contribution from the federal government each year. Amherst was a mini entitlement community and was able to get a guaranteed amount of $900,000 from the state of Massachusetts. Of that number, about $200,000 was used for social services, and from that, the shelter was able to be funded. And so we're very grateful that this year the town, I don't know if it's finalized yet, we can ask Dave Zolnick who came in, but the town has received positive feedback from the Department of Housing and Community Development that indicate that they're going to give them some transition money to help them transition or wean them off of, or Diana might know too, wean them off of the funding that they were receiving, and they'll get about half. So this means about $90,000 will be remaining that can be used for whatever purpose. And the town manager has identified the shelter as a priority and has asked the town meeting, I don't think it's come up, I wasn't there yesterday, it hasn't come up yet, okay, good. I would feel guilty if I wasn't there to vote. They've asked the town manager has asked the town meeting to appropriate $90,000 as a match so that the next 5 priorities that the Community Development Block Grant Advisory Committee has identified can be funded, one of which would be the Survival Center as well as Big Brothers and Big Sisters and things like that. So we're looking forward to that working, but affordable housing, I just want to echo that before I go too far, that we are looking to try to start initially a transitional housing program in the hopes that we can eventually buy the house and turn it into permanent affordable housing. We haven't been able to get to that point yet, but we're hoping to do that very soon.
everyone has mentioned affordable housing, and that is what the main focus of our committee. And one of the problems or difficulties in our town with finding a place for affordable housing, or buying affordable housing, or building affordable housing is the limitations of the zoning laws that exist right now. This was identified by the housing production people in the plan. They identified a number of zoning changes that could be made that would help establish more affordable housing. I'm not going to list them all, but you can look at them on page 4 of the executive summary. If you go there, there's a list of possible zoning laws and zoning changes. And part of the problem with changing the zoning, it's not a problem maybe, but it's the way it is that 2/3 of town meeting has to approve any changes made in zoning. It doesn't just happen. It doesn't happen in isolation. It's very difficult to necessarily have those changes take place. And part of what needs to happen is public education, both for town meeting and for everybody in the community, to know the need for affordable housing, the difficulty of finding it, both for young families or for homeless people, the wide range of people who need affordable housing. And so one of the things that our committee is going to be doing is public education on these issues. You may be seeing more programs like this. We're hoping that faith communities and the service organizations will invite us to come and speak or to provide information. We will be developing information that we're going to be working soon on a brochure that could be handed out at any number of places. There was one a number of years ago at town meeting, and this would be a duplication of that. Not a duplication of that, but similar to that. So those are I think, the challenges for us as we see are the zoning law limitations and the possibility of changing them, and public education, which is a challenge and one that we are working on very soon.
It seems that the big problem is finding affordable housing. In what ways do you all work collaboratively to secure housing for our homeless population? Or do you all work separately?
No, I think, well, I can speak for Soldier On. We work collaboratively. We provide all the moving for the housing court in Berkshire County. We're now providing it for the housing court in Springfield when people have to move. We send veterans with our cube truck and they move them. We provide furniture. We get furniture from Hilton Gardens Inns and Courtyards in New York State through BBL, a construction company that owns about 15 hotels over there. So we get all their stuff every 4 years now. So we pick it all up and we redistribute that to veterans in Western Mass and New York State. We run a food bank. We have about 100 people a week at our food bank. We developed the Veterans Justice Program in the 4 western counties of Massachusetts with Dave Sullivan, who's just the greatest DA in the history of the United States of America. And I have a brother that was a DA in Berkshire County. So I say that, I'm very conscious of that. Dave Sullivan is very concerned about people who are powerless and not getting a fair shake. He's allowed us to establish the Veteran Justice Program, which provides advocates for veterans that end up in court. So rather than criminalizing their behaviors now, they're going to treatment and services, and it's alternative sentencing. It's a tremendous program. We're the main service provider there and coordinate that. We work in the overflow shelters in the western counties. Our veterans go out at night and staff them out and do nights there and help prepare meals. We prepare meals from our kitchen in Pittsfield for like the Homeless Mothers Program and the Teenage Mothers Program. We partner with them. And then we work with all the coordinating agencies like the Western Mass Network to End Homelessness. We're participants in that and supporters. There's not an agency we won't respond to. We have construction teams that go out in the community and do work for the 501c3s. We just built 5 cabins at the Girls and Boys Club camp in Pittsfield, Mass, up on Richmond on the pond for them. So, we try to give back to the community, and we try to work in areas where we think we have talents and gifts, and because we've been fortunate to be blessed with a decent income for our program, and our veterans have skills and talents from their training, so we get that. It's a way of them giving back. So That's what we do. I'd also like to say one thing, and one more, because sitting next to me is a woman who, but we talk about businesses that we want to model how to be corporations with a heart, how to run a business that gives back to the community. And Dietz, through Lynn Wallace and the staff there, are involved with a number of issues for powerless people in Western Mass, okay, on a regular basis, where they more than not only carry their share, okay, they carry the burden for a whole lot of businesses and agencies that aren't doing it. You know what I'm saying? And they're to really be tremendously respected, and we're privileged that they do that in our area. It really makes a huge difference. I wanted to say that because you don't see that in many places, and we operate in about 7 states, and this is a very unusual process to have somebody this gifted and talented available to these communities of people every day in the resources of their agency.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Your turn.
Oh, thank you. We collaborate with a few agencies. One of them is for the homeless prevention program that we work with the Hampshire County Jail and House of Corrections. And what we do is that we go to the jail with Lisa Carabello, our intern and caseworker, and to meet with the inmates there prior to their release. And they have family ties in Amherst and Hadley area. We work with them from the time when they are ready, a few weeks before they are released here. So we set up the basic structure for them, whether it's housing, whether it's employment application, or things that they need, mass health or food stamp application. We work with them from the inside. And when they are released, they continue to work with us. So that's one thing we do for the homeless prevention purpose. And at the Jones Library, we set up referral information desk Tuesday and Thursday afternoon. As you know, homeless folks, they don't always wear a banner on their forehead that says, "I'm homeless, please help me." But when we have a little sign on our desk at the Jones Library, says for housing and emergency services. And the idea is that anybody is welcome to come up, there's no appointment needed. So thanks to the collaboration with the Jones Library, the director extended her welcome to us, so we are able to do so. And also we have a Shelter to Work initiative collaborating with the Amherst Business Improvement District. They offer the street cleaning, for example, working with the people that from Amherst Community Connections that they need housing, but without income they can't get into housing. So just the collaboration, they are able to earn money and either $10 an hour to get 10 hours a week and to pay for the program, housing program they do. And then finally, affirmation through art. Many of our homeless residents, they are very, very talented. They can write poetry, they can write short stories, they can do art, they can do jewelry. So we have a gallery space right in our office. We put up their work to affirm their value in the world.
The Survival Center's model is collaborative at its heart. We have a lot of different partners who we work with to provide all kinds of services beyond our core programs. One day at lunch, I think someone had come from the shelter. They were here to get lunch, and Wayland called to talk to them. So just, you can sort of see it in action all the time. I just wanted to say something about Soldier On, too, because some of your folks come and help us with our furniture sale, Trash to Treasures. I'll just do a little plug right now, which is happening in September. We're starting to collect furniture. But because this is a small organization, sometimes we get thrown into strange roles. So I was driving a big truck last summer when we were picking up furniture. But fortunately, I had one of Jack's guys with me who actually was a truck driver. So I backed us into a horrible place. And he was able to get us out safely. But I thought that was a really great example. I mean, we were two people who maybe never would have met each other otherwise, and I was doing something I never should have done. And he really saved me. So I thought that was just another great example of how, in unexpected ways, sometimes we end up working together to further the same goal.
We also are members of the network, and we get together with them regularly with their individual services committee meeting. And but each night, what we're about really is we're trying to triage people who are in the New England cold, and we're trying to keep them safe each night. So whether we're calling up Soldier On or ServiceNet or the Survival Center during the day, but mostly at night, we're trying to find places for people to go. And we've had excellent cooperation from not only the people who run shelters, but people in the community, like we mentioned earlier, LA Community Homeless Services, as well as Amherst Community Connections comes and helps us with meals, and they are able to make contact with people to try and help them during the day, because we don't have any office hours during the day. Just run the shelter at night. I'm around during the day, but one person. So we do what we can, and it's been a very interesting 2 years so far, and we're looking forward to expanding that collaboration. And we're hoping to be able to get people into permanent affordable housing by adding that component. We've just now finished applying for, well, not finished, we're in the process of applying for an additional state grant to try and cover the beds. As you know, last year we had only 16 beds, and we petitioned the town to add capacity for the, particularly for women, and which they agreed to do. And so, but those beds, there wasn't an additional funding to help us with those beds. So we are now in the process of, well, we've been doing fundraising, but we're also in the process of trying to ask the state to help us through the emergency services grant, solutions grant, excuse me, to try and come up with funding for those unmet beds, basically.
Nancy, you've mentioned some of the agencies that you work with, so could you elaborate on that?
Sure. I would say that Denise the Duke goes to the network meetings, and I've gone with her once or twice and would go more often, but somehow it doesn't always happen. But she's
You have to call
very
Jack's office
active.
for a ride.
All right, that'll be fun. We have collaborated with the CPA committee when they were developing their recommendations for town meetings, and when the Family Outreach and Amherst Housing Authority were trying to raise money for an emergency fund for homeless people, or potentially homeless people, especially the people that were at Echo Village, we were there supporting that particular project. We've continued to meet with Kevin and from Craig's Stores, and we recently met with the residents of Echo Village, and actually I think we've met with them twice, but and listened to tried to understand their situation. Some of us, as members of the committee, volunteer in other ways personally at the different agencies as well. So we have a sort of hands-on as well as that kind of collaboration.
You've answered some of the questions that we intended to ask about reducing homelessness. You're all working at that very diligently. And when I see in the newspapers about the business of LLCs buying houses to rent to folks who can't afford to rent a house, I wonder if that competition is interfering with what you're trying to do.
Absolutely. That's, if a house comes on the market, by the time we can react to it, we can ask for funding anywhere, that it's usually sold.
Mm-hmm.
So it's only, our strategy is being that we will try to rent a house first, and then with an option to purchase it. But we're just we're just in our infancy. We're not in 7 states yet. But, we're working on it.
Could I interject something here regarding the buying of houses when they become available? One of the solutions would be, and it was identified by the housing plan, and we have already tried to do it once in Amherst, would be to have an affordable housing trust. And if you have an affordable housing trust and the money property became available, you don't have to wait for town meeting, you don't have to wait for somebody, the trust can buy that property and use it for affordable housing or for homelessness. And that affordable housing trusts are something that many cities have, or some cities have at least, and it would be a real asset to our community. The funds can come from private donors, it can come from government funds, it can come from grants, and then there would be a pocket of money that people could use for something. It would be much simpler and more direct than, I've been to many meetings where people have talked about a house that was available, and the next thing you know, the house is no longer available. Well, it was there, now it's not there, or it's not appropriate. And if these properties can be identified and money were in the Affordable Housing Trust, then they could be used.
Is there any hope that that trust will be?
We're going to be working on that, actually. That's what our committee has decided, that one of our 2 main goals is going to be that, as well as public awareness of housing in general. Those are our two goals for current goals. And we will be working on it, and we have a subcommittee that's going to be doing it.
I see the time.
Is there any way of maybe saying we've got enough of this, let's go to the legislature and ask for home rule to get rid of this 10% for requirement to be spent on it? So that more money is available for the other places where we need it.
I don't know if any of us
I
have the
don't think-
expertise to answer that
Well,
question.
maybe
Yeah.
Dave could answer that question. Sorry to put you on the spot.
I'm sorry, I didn't know he was in the back when I made my nasty comment.
Well, I don't think he owns the cornfield.
I'm not on the panel, I came to just listen, and the first question from the audience goes my way. I'm Dave Zomack. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the assistant town manager, and I oversee conservation and development, which includes conservation, planning, zoning, etc. And so, Hilda asked an interesting question. I guess I would start first and foremost by saying that the legislation to actually enact the CPA in Massachusetts is very important to recognize where that came from. It didn't come from historic preservation folks. It didn't come from affordable housing advocates. It actually came from conservationists. So the genesis of that entire legislation was about saving open space in Massachusetts. So I suspect that changing that legislation would be an uphill battle, not one I'm particularly interested in climbing with anybody. But I guess what I would say about our open space priorities as they relate to the diminishing amount of developable land in Amherst, I'll say a couple things. One is that more and more we are prioritizing these pieces of land, and I don't want to get in a kind of back and forth with Hilda over land that is or isn't developable. We're by and large not saving land that isn't developable anyway. These are all pieces of property that have been appraised and they can be developed. So the Conservation Commission has their priorities, open space, affordable housing advocates have theirs. So I think it's kind of an old paradigm to pit them against one another. I think more and more we should be looking for partnerships. In recent years, I've been looking at land saying, can we do limited development? In other words, can we save the backland for conservation because it's near a river or stream or wetland and develop the frontage? And we've looked at a couple of parcels very carefully, and in fact, we picked up one which caused some controversy in the community. It was called the Hawthorne Farm. And in fact, we, working with John Musanti and the select board, we have every intention of following through on that project, which is a combination of affordable housing on the frontage. We'll get 2 units there, and open space and recreation on the back portion of the land. So there are ways to partner and not make it one or the other. There's a lot of room in Amherst for infill development in our village centers, a tremendous amount of space for infill development. And I think Nancy referenced the housing production plan, and we have the first stage of our second plan that we got help from outside sources on, which is called our housing market study. And so in particular, the housing production plan looks at many of our village centers and says there is a lot of land close to all sorts of facilities, infrastructure, bus routes, and other already developed land where we should be looking at mixed use, including a percentage of residential, which is affordable housing. North Amherst Village Center, Pomeroy Lane, next time you're down near at the Village Center, near, if you're going to Mission Cantina, or I love that restaurant, or another place, and it's near my house, there's quite a bit of land in the Village Center. So I think we're slowing down to some degree, Hilda, in terms of what we're trying to preserve. There are some signature farms that are left, prime soils that are left, that we do want to preserve. But by and large, I think we ought to look at cooperative projects where we develop some of it for affordable housing, some of it for set aside for wetlands protection or habitat.
That's a good answer, thank you.
All right, in the back?
Me?
Yes. Come on,
I-
stand up.
I've been reading a lot about housing and what we have to do to get more housing. And one of the big problems are the number of students in Amherst and the fact that housing is not increasing and student population is going up. And people don't want students in their backyard. So one of the things I think we have to do, or I'm sure other people have better ideas than I do, is try to get the cooperation of the town and the university to increase the amount of student housing. And certainly UMass has a lot of land that could be built up with student housing, and Amherst has land that could be cooperatively developed with UMass. So I think that if we could do something about that, we could lower the pressure on for people that need affordable housing so that they could get it, and prices wouldn't rise so much because there's so much push for that land. So I would appreciate your comments if you haven't.
I think I saw your hand next, yeah. Do you want to direct it to a
I'm
specific
wondering what
person?
the obstacles are to creating a a housing trust. It's been talked about for 6, 7, 8 years. Are there obstacles?
My experience was that we went to town meeting with a proposal, and town meeting referred it back to the Housing Partnership Committee. That's all I can say. It was fairly close, but a lot of it has to do with people's fear of the unknown, I think, or the fear that affordable housing might be next door to them. I don't know. Some of it's rather subtle, I think, but it didn't happen. We're convinced that we'll work on doing it again, trying again to convince people that it is a worthwhile organization to have that could help to. So we are working on it. We will be working on it, and hopefully town meeting will be more open-minded to it.
There's some suggestion that there's a population of homeless that is veterans, as Mr. Downing said, but I was wondering if others of the panel could describe the group called homeless. I think one of the issues with folks in Amherst is that we hear homeless, but is that all men? I'd like anyone to respond to that.
Well, no, it's not all men, because we accept both men and women at the shelter, and we also, for 30 years, Amherst didn't have a shelter, so anybody who was homeless and who ended up in Amherst needed to find other arrangements to find shelter each night. So until 2009, when the town stepped up and committed to allowing a shelter to exist, there wasn't one here. But by and large, we have a community of people that are just kind of like you and I, except they lack the resources that we have, and or they might be suffering from a substance abuse problem, or they might have a mental health problem. I mean, as Cheryl and I can agree, it's the same population that the Survival Center has been here for 30 years serving. It's the same type of person that comes here that not in all cases, because they have families that are housed as well, but in many cases, the people who are homeless are the same types of people you would see on any day in the Amherst Survival Center.
Or actually,
May I correct that? There was a homeless shelter in, I think it was the Boulders, or Brittany
Sorry, I
Manor.
meant to say that there was also, yes, the Helen Mitchell shelter. But
No,
there
before that, this was at the
there was
Boulders.
there has been shelters for families, and there was that single shelter for women. Right. You're right, Phyllis.
But they were with generally programs. They weren't just people couldn't walk in off the street. They were specific programs. Jesse's house, so they were shelters, but they were either for families. I mean, it wouldn't. Most of the people I met at Craig's stores would not be able to go there.
Jesse's house is a closed referral for families, so you have to be placed there by the state of Massachusetts, whereas Craig's Place, which is the name of our shelter, anybody can walk in, and we have no idea how many people that will be on any given night.
I would say as someone who's volunteered, and I don't work at the Survival Center, though I've been connected with it many years, that they are just people that you might expect to meet in a store, or they're ordinary sort of people. I've done a little bit of the intake, and they were people who were out of work, basically. For whatever reason, they were out of work and they had no place to live. They were not people that, you know, were, and very young people and older people. People in their 50s who do not have a place to live and do not have a job and may have lost their job or whatever. You would not, well, maybe you would be surprised at how they are just people that you might meet somewhere, anywhere, not necessarily even at the Survival Center.
Yeah, you know, again, we don't provide direct services, but pretty much anyone who provides direct services or has anything to do with housing homeless folks has some connection to us. And I mean, you're hitting the nail on the head. It's people that you would see. It is families. It is a lot of single mothers. It is. We have a video on our website that we made. I think it was almost 2 years ago now. And you know, former college professor. It's people with college degrees who, for one reason or another, missed a number of paychecks, whether it was a health, you know, issue or a family issue, a family health issue, weren't able to work and missed a rent payment and were out on the street. So it is a cross section, and I don't know Amherst details specifically, but my guess is, like every other community, it's a cross section. It's women fleeing a domestic violence situation because there's no other place to go.
This is really probably a really far out question. Is there any program, any involvement of people offering to provide services for homeless in their own homes? And part of this goes back to when I was growing up. My mother, out of our kitchen door, would feed homeless people. They wouldn't come into our house, I think, when she would feed them, much to my father's chagrin, because we had 6 kids. But, you know, I think things like that happen at some point. Is there any involvement by people in their own homes providing?
There are a number of people that allow people to couch surf at their home on a temporary basis that represents probably 30 to 40% of the homeless people in any area on any given night are on somebody else's couch, on their porch, in their den, and they're helping that way. We do outreach work in 4 or 5 states where the VA pays us to go out and find underserved veterans, okay, and at risk of being homeless. The Vietnam veterans we've identified throughout the eastern United States who live in rural America as a large group, 90% of them live at 30% of median income or less. Now here's the facts about homelessness that you got to get in touch with. In a capitalistic society, if you're born at the poverty level or below, regardless of what ethnic group you're in, you're 4 times more likely to appear in a negative social statistic in your lifetime, okay? If you're born in a 1-parent family at the poverty level or below, you're 8 times more likely to appear in a negative social statistic. When you start to survey who are the homeless people en masse across large segments, about 74 to 78% are 1-parent, from 1-parent families, and most of them do not come with significant others. And women have learned not to identify as homeless until they've couch surfed and utilized up every relationship, because their children are at risk of being monitored by the state, and it becomes almost an impossible burden to escape for the rest of their parenting days. So women under-identify as homeless and live being exploited and battered very often as a result of that. So there are some things about economics here that we can't duck. And regardless of college town, no college town, these numbers work across the country. I think you have spikes in Amherst because of a particular population, okay? But the reality is, the majority of people we deal with, 84% of the veterans in my care have a mental health diagnosis. 88% have had an addiction problem. Average age of a veteran in our care up until this current conflict was 54 and a half. In the last 2 years, average age has dropped down to 49. Okay? So these shifts take place as a result of, we're in the longest period of war in the history of the United States. 10 consecutive years going on 11. And the price of that is that war lives on in the minds and bodies of those who served. And we can't control that process. We're now understanding that. So it's the same in the homeless population. People who were raised in trauma because they are undernourished, they are battered, they live in difficult circumstances for a lot of their young life, do not trust caregivers, do not trust the system, learn to self-soothe, they become very dependent upon themselves and very manipulative of all the people that want to help, because that's their survival syndrome. So for all of us who do this work, we have to learn to be extremely patient. We have to learn that there's never a thank you. Okay? If you do this work and expect people to say, oh, thank you for all you did, oh, you got a long day coming. Because the reality is they're incapable of that at this point. And it's just our job to serve them, meet their needs, and try to manage them to safe places where they can sustain consistently. We find, to the question you asked, ma'am, though, if people are living in a place and we're delivering services, okay, they're probably 7 to 8 times less likely to ever be homeless again. Think about that. If we stop making them go to the appointments, if we stop making them find the services, and we get the people out to them, they're not going to be homeless anymore. That's really the trick, and we all know that, and that's what we're working to change. And we've all come to that because we thought building better systems work. Building better systems don't work. Serving people where they are and keeping them as safe as they want to be kept safe really works. And eventually people rise to their level of competence. Yes, sir.
Perhaps my question follows on from your excellent summary of the problems in the larger American community and our political, social, and economic situation. I've really been impressed to hear about all the great work the people on the board have, or in our group have addressed us with. But my basic question is about unmet need, or also closely connected with about whether the populations that you serve, are the numbers rising, are the numbers falling, is the relationship of the local communities of the larger world, is there satisfaction with progress made in dealing with the overall problem, the people out there who are in need, and the extent to which that is served?
Is that for everyone, sir?
Yes.
I'll try to tackle it as quickly as I can, which is the network came into existence in 2009 and had this influx of money at the exact same time as we had one of the worst recessions in our country. The network service during our 18-month pilot program, because we had to measure this for the state, over 2,000 people, were somehow serviced by a program that we funded to do that. How do we prove the negative at the end of that 18 period if that money wasn't available, if this organization wasn't working collaboratively? Like literally our folks are at meetings, you guys know this to be true, with I have a person, here's what I think they're eligible for, who has a unit, and they are making matches at our meetings to put people in units. So our struggle is how do we prove, had we not been doing that, what would the homelessness look like in Western Mass? So we think we just need to keep doing what we're doing and prove, when we look at the results of our programs that our partner agencies are doing, that what's the retention? A year later, how many people are still being, in their houses, whether they're receiving services or not? That it's actually good if they are. They're accepting services. How many people a year out are still retaining their housing? How many people 2 years out? And that's the measure of success that we're trying to use.
My answer to that would be,
when I was first out doing this work, I like to say I'm a communist-trained social worker from Western Mass, okay? And I really saw myself as working hard to change that. I worked specifically a lot of my life in addictions in the jails and prisons with the 4 sheriffs in Western Mass. And I did all their reintegration aftercare in the community. What I finally realized is when people are broken, they don't need to be fixed. When people are broken, they need to be loved and accepted the way they are and not told what to do. In that when you develop that environment, you become responsible for their failure. So everyone that works on our staff, if somebody drinks tonight in our facility, if somebody attempts suicide, we failed. And it's our responsibility to build a relationship with that individual of trust so they don't have to go back to self-defeating, self-destructive behaviors as a way of expressing their need. And since we've become responsible for their failure, we no longer brand failures. And we're no longer asking them, why did you drink? Why did you slice yourself? Why didn't you go to work? It's our job to figure out that strategy that helps you get there if you want to get there. And if you don't, it's our job to elicit that information and surround you with the services that'll keep you safe. So we work very hard not to tell adults what to do anymore, and we work very hard to love people the way they are. And it's a very challenging process because you must learn to love rapists and child molesters and addicts and violent people along with the cute children and the talented artists and the great vocalists that are in your community. Because to the degree you don't do that, we keep them captive to their weakness. And most of our social service programs, unfortunately, were designed by well-intentioned people like me who set up rules and regulations so you could fail and we could move you on to the next guy. So you can drink in our programs, you can drug in our programs, you can call us names, you can break every rule that God has made in our programs. It's our job to love you and figure out strategies so you don't have to go back to it. That, we think, is what we also have to start to teach in our communities. We cannot go on using a military correctional model of punishing people, okay, for burdens that they did not ask for and that have come in their DNA and in their life experience. And they're marked to live them out, and our job is to humanize that and make it work the best we can. Are there people we can't help? Yes, there are. And when we come to that point with somebody, we have a very honest conversation and a very sad conversation with them. We say, we're at the limits of what we can do for you. We don't know what more we can do. Where do you think you need to be safe? Because we understand it, but we work very hard never to get there. We see that as our failure. And so that's the challenge, I think, in the communities, is to develop that attitude. And I think the Survival Center, I think many of the people here, that's the motivation we have. We understand that the people we work with are broken, and if they weren't broken and they didn't come to us, we don't have these wonderful jobs and opportunities to serve them. They're our gift. And the more we see them as gift, the more we will elevate them in our care.
Kevin, I think you wanted to jump
Oh,
in
yeah,
on
well,
this
we
as
have
well.
a very similar philosophy to Reverend Downing. No, I've known Jack for a long time, so we get away with teasing each other. But yes, we accept people at the door, and we try not to be judgmental, because that's the worst thing that we can do. And so we're trying to make sure that they are staying safe that night. And we're trying to let them know that we have a community. And because of the cooperation of the town of Amherst, the people that have come forward, people don't just serve a meal, they sit down. And that's similar to the Survival Center. They sit down with people, and there's a camaraderie that exists. And there's an acceptance that, there for the grace of God go we. Mm-hmm. And I think back to your question though, with the government, if we're not called the FAA, there's an exception made for them. If we're not called the meat packers, there's an exception made for them. But everybody else is going to be affected by sequestration, or if you're not going to, there's a continuing resolution if you're going to affect the congressman's pay. But our priorities as a national government, 57% of our budget close to 57% of our budget is spent on the military. And then, as Jack says, he has to deal with them on the other end when we don't do anything for them, when they have to live the day in, day out horrors of what they saw, and then are ostracized by our community. So until we realign these priorities, right now we have a military that's 13 industrialized countries combined spend less money than our military does. So, and we have weapon systems that nobody wants. We have planes that nobody needs. You know what I mean? So until, of course, I'm preaching to the choir perhaps here, but until we realign those priorities and fund programs that need funding, that are going to help people put them into permanent affordable housing, because that's the only solution that that we can strive for, is getting people into permanent affordable housing. If we're not working on that, then we're probably going to be just spinning our wheels.
Well, with that, it sounds as if that issue is the one that all of us should accept as a duty, and maybe the league can take that on as an action item. But I certainly appreciate what you have all said tonight, and I think you're doing great work. It's just wonderful.
Thank you.